Another characteristic of fonts that you'll want to control is the size, and when setting the size, you'll first have to pick between absolute or relative units. Absolute sizes are commonly specified in pixels, and pixels give you very precise control over the font size. Relative units, like percentages or the keywords larger and smaller, or EMs, they allow you to set a font size based on some baseline. So 2 EMs would be twice the size of the baseline, and 0.8 EMs would be 80% of the baseline. Many people today use EMs for relative font sizing. One reason is relative sizes allow a user to scale up the text using their browser, and this is something they might want to do because the text is hard for them to see. Relative sizes allow that to work. Some of the other properties of a font that you can set are the font style to force an italic font, or the font weight to make a font bold, and the font variant property will bring in a typeface that uses only capital letters. Let's use what we've learned so far to improve the look of this page. The first thing I want to do is de-emphasize that H1 element a little bit. It needs to be an H1 element because it is the primary header for this page, but it's a little bit too large for my taste. So let me set the font size to 1.2 EMs. That will bring that down a little bit because typically an H1 tag is going to be well beyond 1.2 EMs. The next issue I want to address is the code listing here. I want this to be a monospace font, and there's a couple different ways to achieve this. For code, there's something specific that I would do, but before I get there, let me show you this approach, which is I have a class on this paragraph element, class equals code, and that would allow me to come into styles.css and say code should have a font family of monospace, and let's make the font size 0.9 EMs just to reduce it a little bit. And now it's looking a little more like code, but notice that version info equal, that particular block of text should really be on the next line. And in fact, if we look at the source code here, we can see that version info equal actually is on a different line than the line that ends here with a semicolon, but web browsers generally don't respect things like tabs and new lines and carriage returns inside of HTML code. What they're trying to do is take that text and get as much of it on one line as possible. What I really want to do here is I want to use a pre-tag, which means this is pre-formatted text, and please don't try to manipulate it. I could still use a class of code, but let's just leave it just as a pre-tag to see how that looks. And you can see that it gets indented, and it follows the formatting that I have here precisely. In fact, it doesn't even break that second line, even if there isn't enough room to display it, so the user is going to have to scroll or open their browser wide enough to be able to see that entire line of code. And most user style sheets will style a pre-element with a monospace font, so that's been taken care of for us. I also just want to come into the content area and add some padding because it's been kind of bugging me that everything is right up against the border. We know from the last module that padding will push things inward away from the border. And let's also come in and style the ordered list that appears here. What I could say is that for an ordered list, I want a font of, and just specifying font allows you to shortcut setting font family, font size, font style. What I could say is I want this to be an italic, 0.9 EM, using a serif font, and you can see how that changed. I don't actually want to override this piece of it, so another way to write this would be to say font style is italic, font size is 0.9 EMs, and now it's still going to inherit the font family setting from the body area. And lastly, there is our copyright notice, which should be in a very small font. So let's come in and put a class of copyright on that particular div. Then I can come into my style rules and say that for a copyright, the font weight should be bold or bolder. Let's just go with bold. And the font size, 0.8 EMs.